In January of 2022, Nintendo briefly brought back Metronome battles in a format called Test Your Luck. The only move you could use was Metronome, a move that randomly picks another move. It was a bring 6 pick 3 format, and interestingly, one of the best items was the Jabaka Berry. The metagame was built around stall, and perhaps even more interestingly, Pokemon Showdown and Nintendo Switch gameplay both had different metagames and slightly different Pokemon who were the best. We're going to take a look at the best strategies of the Test Your Luck format. As a note, Nintendo has had Metronome battles before, like in Generation 7 where it was a 1v1. This video is only going to be talking about the Generation 8 format. Also make sure to subscribe. We're almost at 100k subscribers, and if this video gets new subscribers, it lets me know to keep making more of this type of content. At the core of it, Metronome is not a very good move. Most of the moves you can get are not going to be doing a ton of damage. Metronome battles are about maximizing the odds. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of luck involved. The cruelty of the format is that even the best, most well-crafted strategies can lose to someone who gets really lucky. But the goal is to create strategies that have, on average, better outcomes than picking random Pokemon and diving straight in and hoping for the best. In online Nintendo Switch gameplay, fundamentally the metagame was entirely about timer stall. While you had a limited amount of time per move, online play also had a 20-minute max timer total. If the game reaches 20 minutes and it's still not over, a win is given based on how many Pokemon you have left and then how much HP percentage you have left. That means if you got a KO, your best strategy was to camp and waste time until the 20-minute timer. That is a statistically better idea than trying to get the remaining KOs and risking getting KO'd yourself. Once you got a lead, you started timer stalling, that way your opponent has fewer turns to get lucky and take back the lead. Oftentimes it's literally game over after getting a 3-2 lead because you can effectively timer stall after that. Essentially what you want to do is use Metronome more and more often than your opponent. If you do, then you have more chances to do damage and more chances to get KOs. Abilities like Pressure, for example, are great to limit the number of Metronomes your opponent has. Obviously, Metronome can call moves like Explosion, but on average you get more damage out of using Metronome than doing nothing. The best strategies were to use Metronome as much as you could as early as you could to try and get a lead so that you could then timer stall. A majority of the top games would end up going all the way to the 20-minute limit, with the main exception being games where people forfeited early because they knew the game was heading to 20 minutes and it's unlikely they'd win. Only a very small fraction of games were won because of 3 Pokemon getting knocked out. This is because of people knowing timer stall is the best strategy, but also because it's genuinely hard to get 3 KOs from using Metronome, even if you try your best. This is why one of the top Pokemon was Cursed Body Gengar holding Black Sludge. If Cursed Body activates, then your opponent has to switch out, which means that's one turn where they're not using Metronome. One turn not using Metronome is one turn where they're not getting potential damage, a potential KO, or a chance to take the lead. Switching when you don't have a lead is essentially a wasted turn, and Cursed Body was a good way to force the opponent to switch. Black Sludge was for recovery because if you and your opponent both have the same amount of Pokemon left, HP determines who wins. The format had item clause, which means you couldn't use the same item more than once, and Leftovers is the best item in the format. Black Sludge functionally acts as a Leftovers for Poison-type Pokemon, which is huge because it saves the Leftovers item for a different Pokemon. Also, more fundamentally, Gengar has some nice immunities and a high special attack to deal good damage if it does roll a special move. Another one of the best Pokemon was Leftovers Dusknoir with its ability Pressure. Dusknoir is terrible in most competitive formats, but it's valuable in Metronome battles purely because of Pressure. Pressure does work on Metronome if Metronome calls an attack that targets the Pressure Pokemon. Again, if you can reduce the amount of Metronomes your opponent can use, that means they're less likely to get a KO or damage. Similar to Black Sludge Gengar, Dusknoir uses Leftovers for healing. In fact, Eviolite Dusclops is often better than Dusknoir in most competitive formats, but Leftovers is much more valuable here than Eviolite. Healing every turn gives you more net HP compared to taking less damage per hit from Eviolite, because there are often turns where you take little or no damage. Finally, the next top Pokemon was Pickpocket Jabaka Berry Grimmsnarl. Normally Grimmsnarls use Prankster, but that's terrible here because Dark types stop Prankster Metronome. Even if you could use Prankster Metronome versus Dark types, it wouldn't be good. Moving first in the turn isn't a huge advantage. The main utility of Grimmsnarl here is to use up a berry and then use Pickpocket to steal a leftovers from the opponent. That accomplishes two goals. Not only do you start healing HP every turn, but your opponent stops healing HP every turn. Removing a leftovers from a Pokemon is a huge way to get closer to a knockout. Leftovers is high value and Grimmsnarl has access to Pickpocket anyway, so it lets you use leftovers on a different Pokemon. Any consumable item works, but Jabaka Berry was one of the easiest to trigger while still doing damage, and it was the most popular. The winner of the competition used a Key Berry, but the concept is the same. You want to lose your item and then steal a leftovers. Most teams were literally just these three Pokemon with maybe a variation of the item on Grimmsnarl, but that's about it. There were other options too, like Snorlax, Clefable, Togekiss, and more, but they generally didn't have the insane positives like these three did. For example, Clefable has Magic Guard, which is a fine ability, it's just that it's not as good as something like Pressure or Cursed Body. As for EV spreads, most Pokemon opted for negative speed natures. Outspeeding an opposing Pokemon wasn't a huge advantage. You would rather have more bulk or do more damage from either physical or special attacks. Also, most Pokemon opted for more defense EVs and special defense EVs because there are more physically attacking moves than special attacking moves. There were also some nuances while playing in-game. For example, you really don't want to let Dusknoir attack Grimmsnarl because then you risk losing your leftovers to the Jabaka Berry strategy. If you didn't want to go for timer stall strategies, you did have some all-out attacking options. You could use Pokemon like Life Orb, Magic Guard, Alakazam, or Choice Banded Machamp to try and brute force your way through a team. These strategies were statistically less consistent than timer stall leftovers, but they saw usage because of the obvious benefit of not having to timer stall. Also, Dynamax was usable in the format. However, Dynamax Metronome is just a max guard, so it's mainly useful for more timer stalling. If you had a lead, then you knew you could waste at least one turn for free to take no damage with a max guard. You could also use it if your opponent happened to get a powerful charge-up move like Meteor Beam and you really wanted to block it. That was the metagame in actual online play, but the meta on Pokemon Showdown was actually different. Pokemon Showdown did not implement the hard 20-minute rule. That means you would have to actually beat all three Pokemon to win the game. But this didn't make the metagame better, it made it worse. Instead of timer stalling, the game became about PP stalling. Dusclops, who is not common on the Nintendo Switch, was common on Pokemon Showdown. Dusclops and Dusknoir are both relatively tanky and have the ability Pressure to form a double pressure combo. The best strategy was to infinitely switch between Dusclops and Dusknoir. Statistically, an opponent was more likely to run out of PP than to break through that core. You would spend a few turns to try your luck and break through, but after that your strategy would also become one of infinite switching. Test your luck without a timer and played optimally converges to both players trying to get lucky to win and then switching infinitely once they run out of PP because they don't want to be the one to use struggle and knock themselves out. Leppa Berry versus Pressure Pokemon leads to only 5 more attacking PP, which isn't enough to make it more valuable than leftovers. The bottom line is that if you want to play to win, stalling ends up being the best strategy in Metronome formats. Metronome is not a good enough move to break through a team. Thanks for watching, and a special shout out to the Wobblefett who helped me with the video, so check him out in the description below and let me know what other formats you want me to cover next.